Hello and welcome to another TLDR Brexit Explains video. I feel like we've been telling you this for weeks now, but Brexit's about to be over. I mean, we're really running out of room on this diagram I optimistically made in June when I thought the whole thing could be resolved at an EU summit in October. However, midweek the deadline was shifted yet again, following a meeting of Johnson and von der Leyen when it was decided that negotiators would continue work until Sunday, tomorrow. This isn't the ideal scenario for either side really, with both hoping that this meal between the two leaders would help clarify the situation and lead to a rapid deal. However, following the meeting, both sides reported that their stances were still wide apart, though maybe not as far apart as von der Leyen might have liked.
If we keep distance, then...
In all seriousness though, time is really running out. Both sides have placed their ideal deals on the table, and it seems that neither wants to blink. So in this video, we're going to examine why Johnson's government are refusing the EU's offer. We're going to take a look at the European proposal and see why Johnson says,
I don't believe, Mr. Speaker, that those are terms that any Prime Minister of this country should accept.
For some countries, today is the very last day to order from the TLDR store if you want Christmas delivery. So if you know a friend who'd love a Countries with Shoes pin badge, or even one of our Brexit colouring books, which feature the whole Brexit timeline through 21 images, then now's your time to buy. Also, with our offer to get 2 copies of the book for only $16.99, you can treat yourself too while you're at it. Anyway, the link to the store can be found below. Before we discuss the dinner where Boris Johnson and Ursula von der Leyen met to discuss their differences, let's rewind to earlier that day when Johnson spoke to the House of Commons about the situation.
And I don't believe, Mr. Speaker, that those are terms that any Prime Minister of this country should accept. But I must tell the House and reassure my right honourable friend that whether the terms on which we deliver our new trading arrangements, whether the new arrangements resemble those of Australia's with the EU or whether they're like those of Canada with the EU, I have absolutely no doubt that from January the 1st, this country is going to prosper mightily, Mr. Speaker.
There's a number of issues which are key to this impasse and the difficulties in Brexit negotiations more generally. Issues you're probably very familiar with now. Fishing rights, enforcement of the deal, and level playing field provisions. All of these are very important to both sides and wrapped in the complex politics of Brexit. But one stands out as the biggest issue right now, level playing field provisions. Now, apologies if you're really familiar with this concept, but let me try and bring everyone up to speed. The basic idea of level playing field provisions is that they ensure fair competition between the UK and EU markets post-Brexit. The concern is that if one side wanted to, they could cut employee rights, environmental protections, or quality standards in order to bring down the cost of production and thus make their goods more competitive, undercutting the other side. Both sides broadly agree that this concept of non-regression is a good idea, as cutting any of these things isn't really good for anyone. Then comes the idea of the evolution clause, to try and future-proof the level playing field concept. Essentially, the idea is that going forward, when one side increases their standards, the other should follow. The EU argues that while non-regression is good, it becomes out of date immediately when one side updates their standards, as suddenly a huge gap emerges once again. The evolution clause attempts to solve this problem, ensuring there's no concern of one side getting a competitive advantage by having lower standards, as they both have to broadly keep up with each other. Now, do I even need to explain why the UK doesn't like this? Well, let's hear Johnson's explanation.
Really, just in the last couple of weeks, they've brought back the idea of this equivalence between the UK and the EU, which basically means that whatever new laws they brought in, we would have to follow, or else face punishment, sanctions, tariffs, or whatever. And it was put to me that this was kind of a bit like twins, and the UK is one twin, the EU is another, and if the EU decides to have a haircut, then the UK has got to have a haircut or else face punishment, or the EU decides to buy an expensive handbag, if the EU decides to buy an expensive handbag, then the UK has to buy an expensive handbag too, or else face tariffs and punishment. And
Okay, in hindsight, maybe I do need to explain it, because that clip might have actually confused things further. I mean, all I can think about now is if Johnson and von der Leyen swapped haircuts. No, the reason why the UK takes issue with this plan is that they're concerned it would leave the UK stuck in the EU's orbit. Now, for some countries, this wouldn't be an issue. There's a whole bunch of countries who'd love to be closer to the huge EU market. But for Britain, this is terrible. Unlike basically all other trade talks the EU conducts, the UK is trying to get further away as quickly as possible. Because of that, the idea of both sides following each other's leads on issues like environmental standards and workers' rights doesn't sound great to the UK. Sure, it might work well when the UK's taking pioneering action, but the concern is that the EU could in effect force the UK to change its laws in order to keep up with EU standards, or risk being punished for falling behind. Anyway, the EU denies trying to control Britain, insisting that these are just the standards required to reach a deal. And to be fair to them, sovereignty is always on the table in trade negotiations. Essentially, the whole point of trade talks is negotiating to give up some national power and sovereignty in order to gain greater economic access and economic power. So it was always expected that strings like this would be attached. Also, some in Europe suggest that the government's concerns aren't quite what they're making them out to be, with them actually more concerned by Labour than the EU. That's because if a future Labour government were to ratchet up rights, protections and standards, a move which would have to be mirrored by the EU, it would be difficult for future Conservative governments to roll back these moves. Essentially, rights would always be forced to improve, and that's not exactly how the Tory playbook operates. Government officials would likely deny this, and instead pull focus to the fact that the EU is treating Britain unfairly. The most common argument is that while countries like Canada did have to give up some sovereignty to reach a deal, they weren't bound to mechanisms like this. They'd argue that the EU is being unfair and trying to make an example of the UK. The EU would deny this and point out quite how different Canada and Britain are as trading partners. The amount of trade between Canada and the EU is relatively small, especially when compared to Britain. Also, Britain is obviously just over the channel, making them a much more serious partner or threat. Therefore, the argument goes that the EU needs stricter measures in place to protect their single market when it comes to Britain, a nation that not only does a lot of trade with the EU, but is also geographically far better placed to attempt to undercut the Union. The problem is that this seems to be the last major stumbling block holding up negotiations, with German Chancellor Angela Merkel stating that this is the big, difficult issue which is still on the table, next to questions about fishing quotas and similar things. But the issue of fair competition between two diverging legal systems is the actual big issue for which we need satisfying solutions. It isn't the only issue that people are focusing on though, with Michael Gove also shining a light on the free movement of sausages.
When it comes to making sure that sausages can move across the Irish Sea, that this is a win for the people of Northern Ireland, a win for our supermarkets, but above all, it's a win for Maroš Šefčovič. He is the sausage king of this.
Did I play that clip purely because I made this Sausage King design and chucked it on some merch, and then realised that it didn't really fit into the video anymore? Yeah, that's exactly what happened. One of the most famous quotes about a Brexit deal comes from Dr. Liam Fox, the Conservative MP who remarked that Brexit would be the easiest trade deal of all time. Now, while that is a quite delightfully ironic quote for some, there is a little more to unpack, because the quote goes on and actually says that a deal would be the world's easiest unless politics gets in the way of economics. And whether you think that's a good thing or not, that's pretty much exactly what's happening here. Ultimately, the three major issues that the two sides can't agree on are primarily about symbolism, sovereignty, and politics, rather than the economics of the deal. I mean, tell me the last time you heard a genuine economic dispute about this trade deal. Now, this isn't a bad thing necessarily. The politics is important too, and for some, it's the most important part of Brexit. But it really illustrates that Johnson's biggest issue with the deal, the reason he can't accept it, is because of its political implications. It's not a debate about tariffs or quotas. It's not an explicitly economic issue. It's about the control that the UK will have after Brexit. For some, that's obvious. That's what Brexit's been about since the beginning. For others, it's a baffling stumbling block getting in the way, and making no deal's economic harm only more likely. What do you think though? Is Johnson right that no Prime Minister should or even could sign up to these terms? Or is Johnson putting politics and his party ahead of the country and the economy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we release a new video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that's in the description.